What's up everyone? Welcome back here to the Megan Moves channel. I'm excited to have you guys back here today and excited to share with you what I'm going to be working on today. So this is definitely going to be more of an informal video compared to some of the other videos that I have on my channel if you've been around here for a while, but wanted to share with you guys a new thing that I had recently started. If you've been on my channel, like I said, you will have seen that I have been doing a lot of crafting recently. I started my own Etsy shop and I've started to make some of my very own pairs of mouse ear headbands, but I wanted to kind of expand that new crafting hobby that I had and learn how to take up sewing. So I kind of thought it would be kind of neat to document my sewing journey, kind of how I am learning. I don't really have much sewing experience, so today we're going to be learning how to use my new sewing machine. I got the Brother Gx37, I believe is the model of the sewing machine, and so I'm just going to be practicing how to use the sewing machine. But in order to do that, today we're going to be making scrunchies, so I'll walk you guys through how I plan on doing that. But I knew I wanted to learn and start to practice how to make or use a sewing machine, and I was having a really hard time using good fabric or good material that I was using for my mouse ears. So I thought I might as well go to a thrift shop and get some cheaper clothes, cheaper fabrics to use that I wouldn't necessarily feel bad about using and destroying if I make any mistakes or whatnot. So I was really excited because I went to the thrift shop last week and I ended up getting this old dress that I thought was a really fun piece of material, some fun fabric. It's also stretchy material, which is great for scrunchies, and there's a lot of material here. I think the dress ended up being like $6 or something, so I felt pretty good about it, and so that's what we're going to be using today to make scrunchies. So come along on this video. I'll show you guys how I make scrunchies and we will see how they end up turning out. I'm excited about this video series. I'm going to document some of my sewing experiences and creations that I make just to have a good way to look back and see what my progress is like and how I progress in using a sewing machine. So let's go ahead and get on into it. Okay, so as far as my idea for this dress goes, I'm planning on using the material here at the bottom to make some scrunchies. I'm going to take off some of the material down here to use for the actual scrunchie material that I'll be making tonight. And then as far as the rest of the dress goes, I really love this fabric. I love the dress in general, but it was too big for me and I did want to make it into some scrunchies. So I'm planning on trying to salvage the top and make it into a crop top, cutting it up on the top here and bringing it in on the sides as well as the straps. But that's a little ambitious right now. We'll see how it turns out. But as far as right now, we're just going to go down to the bottom here and cut off some of the bottom of the dress to make our scrunchies out of. Alright, so we have the dress all laid out down here. I've got my little tape measure down here, and we're going to measure out 22 inches for the length of the scrunchie material and then 3 1/4 for the thickness of the scrunchie. This is going to be a little bit trickier than I was expecting because the dress actually scoops down a little bit. It's not actually a straight line for the bottom of the material, so I'm just going to go ahead and mark out 22 inches, and even if it's a little bit bent or a little bit rounded down here, we're going to go with it. We're just going to see how it works out, but I'm going to start at the seam here at the end of the dress and then go to about this gray part here is 22 inches. So I'm just going to mark that. Obviously we're going to use the seam, and then over here we're going to do 22 inches. And then I'm just going to go up and mark 3 1/4 so I know how far up to go. And then over here 3 1/4. We'll see how this turns out, but it is practice and I think it's going to be pretty good. Okay, so it's probably hard to see because the lighting isn't great in here, but we've got our line cut across here and definitely goes from pretty thin to a little bit thick here. So that's something that I'm gonna have to take into account as far as making the scrunchie and the materials that we have here. But I'm just gonna go ahead and start to cut out our material. Okay, so as you can see here, we have our strip of fabric all cut out from the dress. It did feel a little bit weird cutting a dress up, but I am really liking how the material looks. I love this pattern. But you see we have the seam down here at the bottom. I think I'm going to use my roller cutter and just cut that off so we don't have to worry about it for when we go to put the scrunchie together. Now that we have our fabric all cut out, I cut the seam off. It's looking good. So we're going to go ahead and fold it hot dog style. The ends here definitely don't meet up because it is a little bit rounded. Like I said at the bottom of the dress how it was rounded, but we're going to go ahead and see how it turns out anyhow. I'm going to go and sew it here on my sewing machine. We're going to sew the two halves together, leaving about 2 inches on either end not sewn, and that'll make sense later. But we're going to go ahead and just get started and see how it turns out. Okay, so actually, just kidding. I went ahead and put the ends together because once I started sewing, I realized it was going to be kind of hard since the ends didn't match up. So I just used some pins here and made the ends go together. I pinned them down so it'll be a lot easier to sew them now that the ends are together, and it'll be easier to keep them together. So let's actually try to sew this now. Okay, so already off to a rough start. My thread got stuck on the top and it didn't sew. So I'm going to use my seam ripper here, rip out the stitches, and go back and try to do it again. I had to re-thread the machine, get the thread back through the needle, and we are gonna start and do take 2 now. All right. Take 2, I'm feeling determined. We are going to get it this time. So I'm just going to make sure everything is up. Realign my fabric here. Put it in about 2 inches. And lower my presser foot. And we're good to go. So for the most part, it went pretty well sewing our strip here. The only thing is I had some of the overlapping parts missed a little bit, so I had some holes in the fabric. So I just went through and just did random little stitches to cover up those holes. So we'll see how it ends up turning out. Of course, this is still practice training. But for the most part, it went pretty well using my sewing machine. I was really happy with it. And now we're just gonna go and turn the fabric inside out, right side out, and we are going to then go and put our elastic inside. All right, so I have the fabric all turned right side out, and it turned out pretty well for the most part. The seam is looking pretty good, besides where I have some of those holes, but other than that, the seam turned out looking pretty good, and I'm really happy with the fabric. It's already starting to look kind of cool. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to put the elastic here in. Now I'm using 6 inches worth of elastic. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but we're going to go ahead and put it on inside here to start forming our scrunchie. Okay, so just kidding again, before we add the elastic in, we are going to go ahead and sew the 2 bad edges of the scrunchie together, and then we will work to add the elastic in. Alright, so the 2 bad edges are sewn together and it went pretty well, so we're just going to fish the elastic through here and start actually forming our scrunchie. Alright, so I fished the elastic through our scrunchie, so it's starting to come together, and now I have both of the ends of the elastic safety pinned here so I don't lose it in the scrunchie, but I'm going to go on the sewing machine and just sew both of the overlapping edges of the elastic together so they are sewn in place inside of the scrunchie. Alright, our elastic is sewn together, our scrunchie is coming along, and now we're just going to do the final part where we're going to fold in the open flaps here and sew them together on the outside. Alright, and we are all done with our scrunchie. For the most part, it turned out pretty well. I finished up the seam here, the opening that we had, and in the future I will use probably a different thread to cover that up, but it was also a lot bigger of an opening than I was expecting, so in the future I probably won't leave 2 inches, maybe like an inch, half an inch on either side, so that way the seam here isn't as noticeable. But for the most part, it turned out pretty well. I like the size of it. The material from the dress is perfect for scrunchie material, nice and stretchy, and I'm loving all of the colors of the fabric, and I think it turned out pretty well. So for the most part, it went pretty well, especially being my first time making a scrunchie like this using a sewing machine. I think it went pretty well, but of course there's room for improvement, and that will come with future projects and future scrunchies. So thanks for watching today. If you liked what you saw today and want to keep up with my sewing adventures, be sure to subscribe and like this video, and we will see you in the next sewing adventure. See ya!